The photograph arrived on a Tuesday, slipped beneath Daniel Chen's apartment door in a plain manila envelope with no return address. Inside was a single image. Two women, identical in every way, standing on opposite sides of a garden gate. One smiled at the camera. The other looked away, as if she'd heard someone call her name just as the shutter clicked. On the back, written in elegant cursive, "You've already met us both. Now you have to choose." Daniel stared at the photograph until his coffee went cold, his heart hammering against his ribs like a prisoner testing the bars of a cell. Because he recognized both faces. Of course he did. He'd fallen in love with that face. The problem was, he'd fallen in love with it twice. Don't forget to subscribe for more captivating stories. Chapter 1. The First Meeting. 6 months earlier, Daniel Chen had been a different person, or at least, he'd believed himself to be. At 32, he was an architect with a portfolio of award-winning designs, an apartment in the Upper West Side that his mother deemed respectable, and a life that moved forward with the predictable rhythm of subway schedules and client meetings. He was also profoundly, devastatingly lonely, though he would never have admitted it. The loneliness hit him hardest on Thursday evenings, when he'd wander through the city after work, letting the crowds carry him from block to block like a leaf on a river. It was during one of these aimless walks, as October painted the city in shades of amber and gold, that he first saw her. She stood outside the Strand bookstore, her dark hair catching the last rays of afternoon sun, wearing a green coat that reminded him of deep forests and fairy tales. She was reading the back cover of a book, completely absorbed, oblivious to the pedestrian traffic parting around her like water around a stone. Daniel stopped. He couldn't have said why. Perhaps it was the intensity of her focus, the way she bit her lower lip in concentration, or the fact that she seemed to exist in her own private universe, untouched by the chaos of the city around her. She looked up, and their eyes met. For a moment that stretched like taffy, neither of them moved. Her eyes were the color of autumn leaves, that impossible shade between gold and brown that only exists in nature and in dreams. A small smile played at the corners of her mouth, as if she'd just remembered the punchline to a joke told long ago. Then someone bumped into Daniel from behind, breaking the spell. He stumbled forward, catching himself on a parking meter. "Sorry," he muttered to no one in particular. When he looked up again, she was gone. Daniel stood there for a full minute, scanning the crowds, but the woman in the green coat had vanished as completely as if she'd never existed. He might have convinced himself he'd imagined her if not for the strange, electric feeling that lingered in his chest, a mixture of loss and possibility that he couldn't name. That night, he couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, watching shadows move across his ceiling, trying to recall the exact shade of her eyes, the precise curve of her smile. It felt absurd to be so affected by a stranger, by nothing more than a glance and a moment of connection that might not have been connection at all. But Daniel had always believed in moments. In his work, entire buildings could pivot on a single decision, a flash of inspiration that changed everything. Why should life be any different? Chapter 2. The Second Meeting. 3 days later, he saw her again. It was Sunday afternoon, and Daniel had retreated to the New York Public Library to work on a proposal for a community center in Brooklyn. He'd claimed his favorite spot in the rose-Main reading room, surrounded by the cathedral-like silence and the musty perfume of old books. He was deep in sketches, pencil flying across paper as he tried to capture the curve of a roof that would echo the brownstones surrounding the proposed site, when he felt it, that same electric awareness that had stopped him on the street. He looked up. She sat 3 tables away, her dark hair pulled back in a loose bun, wearing glasses that made her look like a beautiful librarian from a 1940s film. She was writing in a notebook, her hand moving in swift, decisive strokes, and she wore the same expression of absolute concentration he'd seen outside the bookstore. This time, Daniel didn't hesitate. He gathered his courage like a man preparing to jump into cold water and stood up. The walk to her table felt impossibly long. Each step gave him time to second guess himself, to imagine all the ways this could go wrong. She could be married. She could be meeting someone. She could be someone who cherished her solitude and resented intrusions. But something in that moment outside the Strand had felt like destiny knocking, and Daniel had never been one to leave destiny waiting. He stopped beside her table and cleared his throat softly. She looked up, and recognition flashed in those autumn-colored eyes. The corner of her mouth quirked upward in that same secret smile. "Hi," Daniel said, and was proud that his voice came out steady. "I saw you outside the Strand a few days ago. I know this is. I never do things like this, but I've been thinking about that moment. I'm Daniel." She studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, to his immense relief, her smile widened. "I remember," she said, and her voice was like honey and smoke. "You looked like you'd seen a ghost." "I felt like I had," Daniel admitted. "A beautiful ghost." She laughed. A real laugh, not the polite chuckle people gave to awkward strangers. "That's quite a line." "It's not a line. It's the truth." She considered this, tapping her pen against her notebook. "I'm Sophia," she said finally. "And I don't usually talk to strangers in libraries, but you have an honest face. Also, I've been stuck on the same paragraph for 20 minutes, so you're actually doing me a favor." Daniel felt something in his chest expand, warm and bright as sunrise. "What are you writing?" "A paper on the intersection of memory and architecture. I'm a graduate student in cultural anthropology." She gestured to the empty chair across from her. "What do you do?" Daniel with the honest face. "I'm an architect," he said, sitting down. "So I guess we have something in common. Memory and buildings." Sophia leaned forward slightly, her interest clearly piqued. "Tell me more." And just like that, they were talking. The conversation flowed with the ease of old friends reuniting, jumping from architecture to anthropology to childhood memories to favorite books. Daniel learned that Sophia had grown up in San Francisco, that she could quote entire passages of Borges from memory, that she was allergic to cats but loved them anyway, that she believed buildings held the echoes of all the lives lived within them. He learned that her laugh came easy and often, that she gestured with her hands when she got excited about an idea, that she had a habit of tucking invisible strands of hair behind her ear even when none had fallen loose. Hours passed like minutes. The library lights flickered a warning that closing time approached, and Daniel felt a spike of panic. He couldn't let her disappear again. "Can I take you to dinner?" he asked as they gathered their things. Sophia paused, her notebook pressed against her chest. Something flickered across her face. Hesitation, maybe, or calculation. "I'd like that," she said finally. "But I should warn you, I'm complicated." "Complicated how?" "Just complicated. My life is complicated right now." She pulled a pen from her bag and grabbed his hand, writing a phone number across his palm. Her touch sent electricity up his arm. "Call me tomorrow. We'll figure it out." Outside, the October evening had turned crisp and cool. They stood on the library steps, the city lights spreading out before them like a field of fallen stars. "I'm glad you came over to my table," Sophia said. "I'm glad I didn't chicken out." She smiled, rising on her toes to kiss his cheek. "Good night, Daniel the architect." Then she descended the steps and disappeared into the crowd, leaving him standing there with a phone number written on his palm and the ghost of her kiss on his cheek. That night, Daniel lay in bed and stared at the number until he had it memorized. He thought about how she'd said her life was complicated, and he wondered what that meant. But mostly, he thought about her smile, her laugh, the way she'd looked at him as if he were something rare and precious. For the first time in months, the loneliness that had become his constant companion was gone, replaced by something brighter and more dangerous, hope. Chapter 3. The Courtship. Daniel called Sophia the next day at exactly 2 p.m., having waited through a morning that felt like a year. She answered on the third ring. I was wondering if you'd actually call, she said, and he could hear the smile in her voice. I almost called at midnight, he admitted. Had to physically restrain myself. Restraint is overrated. They talked for an hour, making plans for dinner that Friday. Daniel suggested a small Italian restaurant in the village that he loved, the kind of place with candles in wine bottles and a menu that never changed. Perfect, Sophia said. I'll meet you there at 7. Daniel spent the intervening days in a state of distracted anticipation. He messed up a client presentation by accidentally showing them designs for a different project. He burned his coffee by forgetting it in the microwave. His colleague Marcus noticed and gave him knowing looks across the office. Who is she? Marcus asked finally, cornering Daniel by the coffee machine. Nobody. Somebody. I don't know yet. You've got it bad, man. I haven't seen you like this since. Actually, I've never seen you like this. It was true. Daniel had dated, of course. There had been Sarah, the lawyer who was married to her job. Emily, the teacher who wanted children and a house in Westchester immediately. A string of second dates that never became third dates, connections that fizzled before they could catch fire. But with Sophia, something was different. He felt it in his bones, in the way his thoughts kept circling back to her like moths to flame. Friday arrived. Daniel changed his outfit 3 times and still arrived at the restaurant 15 minutes early. He ordered wine and tried to calm his nerves by sketching on a napkin, a habit from childhood that still helped him think. At 7:03, Sophia walked in, and Daniel's breath caught. She wore a simple black dress and her hair down, waves cascading over her shoulders. She looked like a film noir heroine, dangerous and beautiful. Sorry I'm late, she said, sliding into the seat across from him. My sister called right as I was leaving. You have a sister? Something flickered across Sophia's face, that same complicated expression from the library. A twin, actually. Identical. That must be interesting. Yeah, it's interesting. She picked up the menu, clearly eager to change the subject. What's good here? Daniel let her redirect the conversation, but filed the information away. A twin sister. That explained the complication comment, perhaps. Twins were notoriously close, or so he'd heard. Dinner was perfect. The food was excellent, but Daniel barely tasted it, too absorbed in Sophia herself. She told him about her research, about how she'd become fascinated with the way physical spaces shaped memory and identity. She talked about her childhood, growing up in San Francisco with parents who were both professors. My sister and I were basically raised in university libraries, she said, twirling pasta around her fork. We do our homework in whatever building our parents were teaching in. I think that's why I'm so comfortable in academic spaces. They feel like home. Tell me about your sister, Daniel said. What's she like? Sophia's expression grew distant. We're very close. Always have been. People say twins are like 2 halves of the same person, but that's not quite right. We're more like 2 different versions of the same song. Same notes, different arrangements. Is she in New York too? Yes. Sophia paused, choosing her words carefully. She's here. We see each other often. Maybe too often, some people would say. I don't think you can see family too often. Sophia smiled, but there was sadness in it. You'd be surprised. They talked until the restaurant began closing around them, the waiters gently suggesting they might want to consider dessert or perhaps their check. On the street outside, neither wanted the evening to end. Walk with me, Sophia asked. They wandered through the village, past jazz clubs exhaling music and bars spilling golden light onto the sidewalk. Sophia's hand found his, her fingers interlacing with his fingers, and Daniel felt that sensation again, destiny clicking into place, the universe arranging itself around this moment. I like you, Daniel, Sophia said as they paused on a bridge over a small, forgotten stream in Washington Square Park. I like you a lot. But I meant what I said about being complicated. There are things about my life that are difficult to explain. Try me. She turned to face him, her expression serious in the streetlight. My sister and I were very close. Unhealthily close, some people have said. We've always done everything together. Lived together, studied together, even dated the same guy once in college, not at the same time, she added quickly, seeing his expression. But there's a pattern of sharing our lives completely. And I'm trying to break that pattern, to have something that's just mine. But it's hard. Daniel reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture feeling natural despite its intimacy. I don't mind complicated, he said. And I don't mind that you have a close relationship with your sister. Family is important. You say that now, Sophia said softly. I mean it. She studied his face for a long moment, then rose on her toes and kissed him. It was a real kiss this time, not the friendly peck from the library steps, and Daniel felt it all the way to his toes. She tasted like wine and possibility. When they broke apart, she was smiling. You're dangerous, Daniel Chen. Dangerous how? You make me want to believe things could be different this time. They kissed again, longer this time, and the city faded away until there was only the two of them, suspended in a moment that felt both new and ancient, like something they'd done 1,000 times before in 1,000 different lives. Chapter 4. The Autumn Romance. The next few weeks unfolded like a dream. Daniel and Sophia fell into an easy rhythm, seeing each other 3 or 4 times a week. They went to museums and movies, took long walks through Central Park as autumn deepened toward winter, spent rainy Sunday afternoons in Daniel's apartment, her feet in his lap while she read and he sketched. She was brilliant and funny and passionate about her work. She introduced him to Borges and magical realism, to the idea that buildings were essentially memory palaces, physical manifestations of human consciousness. He showed her his designs, explained the mathematics of beauty, the way a well-designed space could make someone feel small or expansive, peaceful or energized. You're a poet, she told him once, lying on his couch with her head in his lap. You just work in concrete and steel instead of words. Is that what you're studying? He asked, running his fingers through her hair. The poetry of architecture. In a way, I'm looking at how immigrant communities use architecture to maintain cultural memory. The way a Chinese restaurant in Chinatown might echo the layout of a traditional family compound back in Guangdong. Or how a bodega in Washington Heights might be arranged like a colmado in the Dominican Republic. It's about home, ultimately. About carrying home with you wherever you go. Daniel thought about this often in the quiet moments of his work. He'd never considered his designs in terms of memory and cultural identity, had always focused on function and aesthetics. But Sophia was teaching him to see differently, to recognize that every building was a conversation between past and present, between the place it occupied and the places its inhabitants had left behind. She was changing him, making him more thoughtful, more aware. And he was happier than he'd been in years. There was only one strange thing. Sophia was oddly secretive about certain aspects of her life. She never invited him to her apartment, always insisting on meeting at his place or in public. When her phone rang, she'd often excuse herself to take the call privately. And she refused to be in any photos, claiming she hated how she looked in pictures. Trust me, she said when he tried to take a selfie of them at the Met. You don't want photographic evidence of my weirdness. He found it endearing, this quirk. Everyone had their oddities, their private peculiarities. Marcus thought it was a red flag. She's definitely hiding something, Marcus said over beers one Thursday night. Married, maybe, or in witness protection. She's not hiding anything, Daniel insisted. She's just private. There's private and there's shady, my friend. Just be careful. But Daniel wasn't careful. He was falling in love, and love required a certain reckless faith, a willingness to leap without knowing where you'd land. He realized he loved her one evening in early November. They were cooking dinner together in his kitchen, or rather, she was cooking while he provided moral support and chopped vegetables under close supervision. She was wearing one of his shirts, her hair piled on top of her head, singing along to the music playing from his phone. She turned to say something, gesturing with a wooden spoon, and the look on her face, laughing, unguarded, completely present, hit him like a physical force. This was love. This warm, expansive feeling that made his chest ache and his fingers itch to hold her and never let go. This certainty that she was the person he'd been unconsciously waiting for, that every choice he'd made had been leading him to that moment outside the Strand when their eyes first met. What? Sophia asked, noticing his stare. Nothing. Just, you're beautiful. She smiled, that secret smile that was his favorite expression in the world. Flatterer. Truth teller, he corrected, and pulled her in for a kiss that tasted like tomatoes and basil and happiness. He almost told her he loved her that night, but something held him back. A sense that she wasn't quite ready to hear it, that there was still a part of herself she was holding in reserve. So he waited, and the autumn deepened, and they fell further into their dream together. Chapter 5. The Sister. Daniel finally met Sophia's sister in mid-November, quite by accident. He was having lunch at a cafe near Columbia University, catching up on some work before an afternoon meeting, when he saw her through the window. Sophia, wearing a blue coat he'd never seen before, talking animatedly to a man at one of the outdoor tables. Daniel's first instinct was to go out and say hello, but something stopped him. The body language was wrong. This Sophia sat differently, gestured differently. And she was touching the man's arm with a familiarity that sent ice through Daniel's veins. He watched, frozen, as she laughed at something the man said. She leaned forward, and the man leaned forward too, and... No. Daniel looked away, his stomach churning. This couldn't be happening. Sophia wouldn't. They were exclusive, they'd talked about it. She wouldn't. He forced himself to look again, and this time he noticed the details. The coat was wrong. The hair was slightly different, parted on the wrong side. And something about the face, though identical, was subtly different. The way she smiled. The energy she projected. Not Sophia. Her twin. Relief flooded through him so powerfully that he nearly laughed. Of course. The identical twin sister she'd mentioned. They looked exactly alike. It was an easy mistake to make. He should leave, he knew. This was private, her sister's life. But curiosity held him in place. He wanted to see this other version of Sophia, this woman who was both her and not her. The sister, he realized he didn't even know her name, stood up. She kissed the man on both cheeks in that European fashion, then headed down the street away from the cafe. Daniel made a split-second decision and followed her. He kept his distance, feeling ridiculous and slightly creepy, but unable to stop himself. She moved differently than Sophia, he noticed. More purposefully, with longer strides. She stopped at a bookstore, not the Strand, but a smaller place specializing in art books, and browsed for 20 minutes. Daniel pretended to look at the architecture section while watching her from the corner of his eye. She selected a book on installation art and took it to the register, chatting easily with the clerk. Her voice was the same as Sophia's but used differently, he thought. More confident, maybe. Or just differently confident. She left the bookstore and headed toward the subway. Daniel was about to give up his ridiculous reconnaissance mission when she suddenly turned and looked directly at him. Their eyes met. Her expression cycled through surprise, confusion, and something else, recognition. But how could she recognize him? They'd never met. Unless Sophia had shown her pictures. But Sophia didn't believe in photos. The woman's eyes narrowed. Then, to Daniel's complete shock, she walked directly toward him. You're Daniel, she said. It wasn't a question. Yes. And you're Sophia's sister. Isabella. She crossed her arms, studying him with an intensity that was both like and unlike Sophia's gaze. Were you following me? No. Maybe. I saw you at the cafe and I thought you were Sophia, but then I realized you weren't, and I was curious. I'm sorry, that sounds terrible. It sounds like something a stalker would say. I'm not a stalker. I'm just. Sophia's talked about you, but she's never introduced us, and I wanted to. He trailed off, realizing how weak this sounded. Isabella's expression softened slightly. She hasn't told you about me. She mentioned she has a twin. That you're close. Close. Isabella laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's one way to put it. Look, Daniel, I don't know what Sophia's told you, but. She stopped, shook her head. No. This isn't my conversation to have. You should talk to her. Talk to her about what? Just. Ask her to be honest with you. About everything. About me. Isabella looked sad suddenly, and in that sadness Daniel saw a glimpse of Sophia, saw the connection between these two women who shared the same face but seemed to live in very different worlds. I should go, Isabella said. It was interesting to meet you, Daniel. For what it's worth, I think Sophia really likes you. More than she's liked anyone in a long time. Maybe that will be enough. Enough for what? But Isabella was already walking away, leaving Daniel standing on the sidewalk with more questions than answers. That night, he told Sophia about the encounter. She went very still when he mentioned seeing Isabella. What did she say to you? Sophia asked, her voice carefully neutral. Not much. She said I should ask you to be honest with me. About everything. Sophia closed her eyes. I knew this would happen. I knew it was too good to be true. What are you talking about? What would happen? Daniel. She opened her eyes, and they were bright with unshed tears. There's something I need to tell you. About me and Isabella. About our situation. Okay, Daniel said, taking her hands. Whatever it is, we'll deal with it. Promise me you'll listen to the whole thing before you decide anything. I promise. She took a deep breath. Isabella and I aren't just close. We've always been entangled in each other's lives in ways that aren't normal or healthy. We've shared everything, friends, interests, even romantic partners. Not at the same time, she added quickly, but we've had this pattern where one of us will date someone, and then the other will too, and it becomes this confusing mess where nobody knows who's with whom. Okay, Daniel said slowly. But you and I are together. Not you and Isabella and me. I know. And I want it to stay that way. You're the first person in a long time who I've wanted to keep just for myself. But Isabella, she has a hard time with that. With me having something she doesn't have. So what does that mean? It means she might try to. I don't know. Insert herself into our relationship somehow. Not maliciously. She doesn't mean harm. But she can't help herself. We've been each other's entire world for so long that she doesn't know how to be just herself. Daniel processed this. And you're trying to figure out how to be just yourself. Yes. Exactly. That's what I meant when I said my life is complicated. I'm trying to establish boundaries with Isabella, to have my own identity separate from being half of a twin set. And it's hard, Daniel. Really hard. There's guilt and obligation and this feeling like I'm abandoning her every time I choose something that's just mine. He pulled her close, feeling her tension. I understand. And I want to help, if I can. But you have to communicate with me, Sophia. You have to let me in. I know. I'm trying. This is me trying. They held each other in the darkness of his apartment, and Daniel thought about twins, about two people who shared the same genetic code and the same face but were fighting to become individuals. It was tragic, in a way. And he understood Sophia's struggle better now, her secretiveness and hesitation. But something Isabella had said nagged at him. Ask her to be honest with you. About everything. What was the everything? Was there more Sophia wasn't telling him? He pushed the thought away. She'd been honest with him tonight. She'd explained the situation with her sister. That was enough. It had to be enough. Chapter 6. November Rain. The next few weeks were strained. Sophia grew distant, canceling plans and taking longer to return his texts. When they did see each other, she seemed distracted, always checking her phone, always somewhere else in her mind. Is everything okay? Daniel asked one evening after she'd checked her phone for the 5th time during dinner. It's Isabella, Sophia said. She's going through something. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be so absent. Can I help? No. This is something between me and her. She reached across the table and squeezed his hand. But I appreciate you being patient with me. Thanksgiving approached. Daniel's family was in California, and he'd planned to spend the holiday alone or with Marcus, who had similar orphan status on the East Coast. But Sophia surprised him by inviting him to Thanksgiving dinner with her and Isabella. Are you sure? He asked. If it's just the two of you. I want you there, she insisted. And it's time you properly met Isabella. Maybe if you two know each other, all of this will feel less weird. So Daniel found himself, on Thanksgiving Thursday, carrying a bottle of wine and a pumpkin pie to an address in Brooklyn Heights. The apartment building was beautiful, a pre-war structure with an elegant lobby and an elevator with an accordion gate. Sophia answered the door wearing an apron and a stressed expression. You're here. Thank God. I'm drowning in Turkey logistics and Isabella's been no help whatsoever. She kissed him quickly and pulled him inside. The apartment was stunning. High ceilings, exposed brick, windows overlooking the East River. But what caught Daniel's attention was the layout. It was clearly designed for two people, with 2 bedrooms on opposite ends of a large living space, 2 desks, 2 of everything. They lived together. Of course they did. Isabella. Sophia called. Daniel's here. A door opened, and Isabella emerged from one of the bedrooms. She wore jeans and a sweater, her hair down, and for a dizzying moment, Daniel couldn't tell which sister was which. Then Isabella smiled, that confident smile he'd seen in the bookstore, and the spell broke. Daniel. Good to see you again. Officially this time. Thanks for having me. Sophia insisted. And she cooks better when she has an audience. Isabella moved to the kitchen and poured herself a glass of wine. Want one? Please. The afternoon unfolded with surreal normalcy. The sisters bantered as they cooked, finishing each other's sentences in that way twins supposedly did. Daniel helped where he could, setting the table and carving the turkey, trying not to stare at the strange doubling effect of having 2 Sophias in the same room. Because that's what it felt like. Isabella looked exactly like Sophia, but the similarity went deeper than appearance. She had the same hand gestures, the same laugh, the same way of tilting her head when she was thinking. It was uncanny and beautiful and deeply unsettling. Over dinner, Daniel learned that Isabella was also a graduate student, studying art history at NYU. She was writing her dissertation on contemporary installation art and the body. She was funny and sharp and engaging, and Daniel found himself liking her despite the strange circumstances. But there was an undercurrent of tension between the sisters that he couldn't quite name. They were perfectly polite to each other, but there was a carefulness to their interactions, as if they were both trying very hard not to say something. After dinner, Sophia went to answer a phone call from their parents in California. Daniel helped Isabella clear the table. So, Isabella said as they loaded the dishwasher, you're still here. Should I not be? I wasn't sure you would be. After Sophia told you about our situation. Why wouldn't I be? So you two are close. That's not a crime. Isabella laughed. You're sweet. And naive. But mostly sweet. She handed him a plate to rinse. Can I give you some advice? Sure. Be careful with Sophia. She means well, but she doesn't always know what she wants. Or she knows what she wants but can't figure out how to get it without hurting someone else. Usually me. She's trying to establish boundaries, Daniel said, defending her. That's healthy. Is it? Or is it just another form of control? Isabella shook her head. Sorry. That's not fair. I'm being bitter. Why are you bitter? Because. Isabella paused, choosing her words carefully. Because I love my sister. And I want her to be happy. But I'm also watching her pull away from me, create this whole life I'm not part of, and it feels like I'm losing my best friend. My other half. There was real pain in her voice, and Daniel felt sympathy wash over him. You're not losing her. She's just growing. Maybe. Or maybe she's replacing me. Isabella looked at him, and her autumn-colored eyes were sad. With you. Before Daniel could respond, Sophia returned from her phone call. What are you two talking about? Nothing, Isabella said quickly, her smile back in place. Just getting to know your boyfriend. The rest of the evening passed pleasantly enough, but Daniel couldn't shake his conversation with Isabella. There was something desperate in her sadness, something that went beyond normal sibling rivalry or separation anxiety. When he left, Sophia walked him down to the street. Thank you for coming, she said, wrapping her arms around his waist. I know that was probably weird. It wasn't weird. Your sister's nice. She likes you. I can tell. There was something odd in her tone, but Daniel dismissed it. Good. I want her to like me. Do you? Sophia looked up at him, her expression strange. Even if her liking you complicates things. How would it complicate things? Never mind. I'm overthinking. She kissed him. Go home. Get some sleep. I'll see you this weekend. Saturday. We're still on for the Guggenheim. Wouldn't miss it. But Saturday came, and Sophia canceled, claiming she wasn't feeling well. Sunday too. By Monday, Daniel was worried enough to show up at the Brooklyn apartment with soup and medicine. Isabella answered the door. Oh, Daniel said. I was looking for Sophia. She said she was sick. She's not here, Isabella said. But she said, he stopped. Where is she? Out. She's fine, Daniel. Not sick. She just needed some space. Space from me. Isabella sighed. Can you come in? I think we need to talk. Daniel followed her into the apartment, that same sense of unreality washing over him. Isabella gestured for him to sit on the couch, then took the chair opposite him. Sophia asked me not to tell you this, Isabella began, but I think you deserve to know the truth. The whole truth, not just the sanitized version she's been feeding you. What truth? Sophia and I don't just share an apartment. We share a life. We always have. And I don't mean in the normal twin way. I mean we've constructed our entire existence around this idea of being two halves of the same person. We dress the same, study complementary fields, even developed a system where we'd sometimes switch places. Pretend to be each other. Daniel's stomach dropped. Switch places how? In small ways, mostly. Going to each other's classes if one of us was sick. Answering the other's emails. It started as a game when we were kids and just never stopped. Isabella leaned forward. We've had this pattern in relationships where we'd both date the same person, taking turns, seeing who they liked better. It was toxic and manipulative and wrong, but we couldn't stop ourselves. And Sophia told me she was trying to break that pattern. She is. You're different. She really likes you, Daniel. Enough that she wanted to keep you separate, to not involve me. But it's killing her, being split between her old life. Chapter 7. The Truth Unravels. Daniel stood up abruptly, the room spinning slightly. Are you telling me that Sophia has been? That you've been? No, Isabella said quickly. Not with you. I swear, every moment you've spent with Sophia has been with Sophia. I've stayed away. That was the deal we made. The deal you made, Daniel repeated hollowly. Like I'm some kind of prize in a game between you two. It's not like that. Then what is it like, Isabella? Because from where I'm standing, I've been dating someone who's been lying to me for months about who she is and what she wants. Isabella's expression crumbled. She loves you. That's not a lie. And she's terrified of losing you, which is why she hasn't told you everything. Because everything is messy and complicated and insane, Daniel finished. He grabbed his coat. I need to talk to Sophia. Now. Where is she? She's at the library. The one where you first met. Daniel was already halfway to the door. Daniel. Wait, Isabella caught his arm. Before you go, you should know something else. Something Sophia made me promise never to tell you. What could possibly be worse than what you've already told me? Isabella's eyes filled with tears. That day at the Strand. When you first saw her. That wasn't Sophia. The words landed like a physical blow. Daniel stared at her, unable to process what he was hearing. That was me, Isabella whispered. I was the one in the green coat. I was the one you locked eyes with. And when Sophia found out I'd met someone who looked at me like I was the only person in the world, she wanted what I had. So we switched. She went to the library pretending to be me, and you never knew the difference. Daniel pulled his arm free, backing toward the door. You're lying. I wish I was. But think about it, Daniel. Think about all the inconsistencies. The way she wouldn't take photos. The way she kept you away from here, from me. She was afraid you'd figure it out, that you'd see us together and realize she wasn't the woman you first fell in love with. Stop. Just stop. Daniel's hands were shaking. I don't believe you. Then ask her. Ask her about the green coat. About the book she was reading outside the Strand. She won't be able to tell you, because she wasn't there. Daniel fled the apartment, Isabella's words chasing him down the stairs and into the street. His mind was a whirlwind of memories, each one suddenly suspect. Had it been Sophia at the library? The dates that followed, which moments were real and which were performance? The November rain had started, cold and relentless. Daniel barely noticed as he made his way to the library, his clothes soaking through. He ran up the steps two at a time, through the familiar marble halls to the rose main reading room. Sophia sat at the same table where they'd first talked, as if she'd been waiting for him. She looked up as he approached, and her face went pale. Daniel. Tell me the truth, he said, his voice low and dangerous. Right now. All of it. Chapter 8. The Confession. Sophia closed her laptop slowly, her hands trembling. You talked to Isabella. She said you weren't the woman I met outside the Strand. She said you stole me from her. I didn't steal you. You were never hers to begin with. So it's true. Daniel sank into the chair across from her, suddenly exhausted. Everything Isabella told me is true. Sophia was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Yes. And no. It's true that Isabella was the one you saw outside the Strand. But everything after that, every conversation, every date, every moment we've shared, that's been real. That's been me and you, not some game or performance. How am I supposed to believe anything you say? Because I'm telling you the truth now. Finally. Sophia's eyes were bright with tears. When Isabella came home that day talking about the man she'd locked eyes with, describing you like you were some kind of miracle, I was jealous. Not because I wanted you, I didn't even know you. But because I wanted what she had. That feeling of connection, of possibility. We'd been in this toxic spiral for so long, always competing, always comparing, and I just wanted something pure for myself. So you pretended to be her. I went to the library thinking I'd just see what you were like. Maybe warn you about our situation. But then you came over to my table, and you looked at me with those same eyes Isabella had described, and I felt it too. That connection. Only it wasn't her connection anymore, it was mine. And I know that's selfish and wrong, but I didn't know how to stop it once it started. Daniel laughed bitterly. You could have told me the truth. When? On our first date. Hi, nice to meet you, I'm actually not the woman you thought you met, but let's give this a shot anyway. You would have run. Maybe I would have. Maybe I deserved that choice. You're right. You did deserve that choice. And I robbed you of it because I was a coward. Sophia wiped her eyes. But everything that came after that first deception, that was real, Daniel. My feelings for you are real. I fell in love with you. Actually in love, not just fascinated or infatuated or whatever else I've felt before. You made me want to be better, to break away from this sick dynamic with Isabella and become my own person. By lying to me every single day. I know how it sounds. But put yourself in my position. How do you tell someone that the person they think they met isn't the person they're dating? How do you explain that you and your sister have this history of swapping identities and sharing lives? There was never a good time, never a right moment. And the longer it went on, the more impossible it became to say anything. Daniel stood up, pacing in front of the table. A librarian shushed him, and he lowered his voice. What about Isabella? She just accepted this. Let you take over her. Whatever I was to her. No. She was furious. We had the biggest fight we'd ever had. She wanted to tell you everything, to expose me. But then she saw how happy I was, happier than I'd been in years, and she. Sophia's voice broke. She loved me enough to let me have this. Even though it killed her. Even though she'd been the one to find you first. That's not love, Sophia. That's codependency. I know that. We both know that. That's why we've been seeing a therapist, trying to untangle ourselves from each other. You were the catalyst for that, Daniel. Meeting you made me realize how unhealthy our relationship had become. How we needed to establish real boundaries, separate lives. And it's been hard, so hard, but I've been trying. Daniel stopped pacing and looked at her. Really looked at her. She was smaller than he remembered, more fragile. The confidence he'd always admired seemed to have cracked, revealing the scared woman underneath. Did you ever switch places with me? He asked. After that first time, did Isabella ever pretend to be you? No. Never. I swear on everything I have, Daniel. Every moment you've spent with me has been with me. Isabella stayed away. That was our agreement. Your agreement. Like I'm not even a person in this equation, just a chess piece you two move around. You're right. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Sophia stood up, moving toward him. But I love you, Daniel. I love you enough to tell you the truth now, even though I know it might mean losing you. I love you enough to want you to make a real choice, based on real information, about whether you want to be with me. Daniel backed away from her outstretched hand. I need time. I need to think. I understand. Do you? Because I don't know which memories are real anymore. I don't know if the woman I fell in love with even exists, or if she's just a performance you created. She exists, Sophia said fiercely. I exist. Not the twin version, not the half-person I've been for most of my life. Just me, Sophia. The woman who loves Borges and burned your dinner and laughs at your terrible jokes. That person is real. Maybe. But I don't know if I can trust her. Daniel walked away, leaving Sophia standing in the reading room where they'd first connected. Or where he thought they'd first connected. He didn't know anything anymore. Chapter 9. The Choice. Daniel spent the next week in a fog. He went to work, came home, stared at his walls. Marcus tried to get him to talk about it, but Daniel couldn't find the words. How did you explain that you'd fallen in love with a woman who might not be who you thought she was? That your entire relationship had been built on a lie? Both sisters tried to contact him. Sophia sent long texts apologizing, explaining, pleading. Isabella sent shorter messages, just checking in, making sure he was okay, saying she was sorry for her part in the deception. Daniel ignored them both. On the 8th day, the photograph arrived. He stared at it for hours, trying to see the difference between the two women. They were identical down to the smallest detail, same face, same hair, same autumn-colored eyes. But there was something in their postures, in the way they held themselves. One sister faced the camera directly, open and honest. The other looked away, caught between two worlds. Which one was Sophia? Which one was Isabella? Did it matter? Daniel thought about the woman he'd fallen in love with. Her laugh, her intelligence, the way she'd made him see his work differently. The way she'd fit into his life like a key sliding into a lock. Were those feelings any less real because they'd been built on a false foundation? He thought about that first moment outside the Strand, that electric connection he'd felt. If it had been Isabella instead of Sophia, would the relationship have unfolded differently? Would he have fallen in love with her instead? Were the sisters so interchangeable that it didn't matter which one he'd met first? No. Sophia was right, they were like two different versions of the same song. Similar but distinct. And he'd fallen in love with Sophia's particular arrangement, with her specific way of being in the world. But could he forgive the lie? His phone buzzed. A text from Sophia. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm asking you to let me earn back your trust. One day at a time. If you'll give me that chance. And one from Isabella. My sister loves you more than she's ever loved anyone. That's not nothing. That's not a lie. Whatever you decide, please remember that. Daniel picked up the photograph again, studying the two women separated by a garden gate. A boundary. That's what the gate represented, the boundary Sophia had been trying to establish, the separation she'd been fighting for. She'd fought for it by lying to him. By building their relationship on deception. But she'd also fought for it by being more honest with him than she'd ever been with anyone, even if that honesty came too late. By choosing him over the toxic codependency with her sister. By trying, however imperfectly, to become her own person. People were complicated. Relationships were messy. Love didn't always arrive in neat, uncomplicated packages. Daniel made his decision. Chapter 10. The Garden Gate. Daniel asked them to meet him in Prospect Park, near the Rose Garden. It seemed appropriate somehow, a garden, like the one in the photograph. A place of growth and transformation. They arrived separately, each wearing different colored coats so he could tell them apart from a distance. Sophia in green, the green coat from that first day, he realized. Isabella in blue. They stood on opposite sides of the path, waiting. Two versions of the same song. Daniel approached Sophia first. I've been thinking about what you said, he began. About how you wanted to be your own person, separate from Isabella. About how meeting me was the catalyst for that. Sophia nodded, not speaking. Her eyes were red, as if she'd been crying for days. Maybe she had. The thing is, you can't become your own person by hiding behind lies. You can't establish boundaries by being dishonest about where those boundaries are. You have to own your choices, Sophia. The good ones and the bad ones. I know, she whispered. I don't know if I can forgive you yet. Maybe I will eventually, maybe I won't. But I do know one thing, I fell in love with the real you. Not the person you pretended to be, but the complicated, messy, struggling person underneath. The woman who's trying to figure out who she is separate from her twin. That person is worth fighting for. Sophia's breath caught. What are you saying? I'm saying I want to try. To start over, with honesty this time. No more lies, no more secrets. Just you and me, figuring this out together. He paused. But there's a condition. Anything. You need to keep working on your boundaries with Isabella. You need to continue therapy, both together and separately. And you need to be honest with me about your progress, the setbacks as well as the victories. Can you do that? Yes. I promise. I'll do whatever it takes. Daniel turned to Isabella, who'd been standing quietly the whole time. And you. I need you to respect what Sophia and I are trying to build. No more games, no more switching places. If we're going to make this work, there has to be clear boundaries. Isabella nodded, tears streaming down her face. I understand. And I'm sorry, Daniel. For my part in all of this. You didn't deserve to be dragged into our dysfunction. No, I didn't. But I'm choosing to stay anyway. Not because I'm naive or because I don't see how complicated this is, but because I believe people can change. I believe Sophia is worth the risk. He looked between the two sisters, so identical in appearance, so different in every other way. I also think you two need each other. Not in the codependent way you've been doing it, but in a healthier way. You're twins. That bond is special, but it can't be the only thing that defines you. We're working on it, Isabella said. Both of us. For real this time. Daniel pulled the photograph from his pocket and handed it to Sophia. Where did this come from? She looked at it, then at Isabella. Neither of us sent it. Then who? Our therapist, Isabella said suddenly. Dr. Chen. She must have taken it during one of our sessions in her garden. She's been pushing us to make a choice, to either fully commit to separating our lives or to accept that we'll always be enmeshed. This must be her way of forcing the issue. By forcing me to choose, Daniel said. By showing you the truth, Sophia corrected. Two sisters, divided by a gate. The question was whether you'd try to tear down the gate or respect its existence. Daniel took Sophia's hand. I choose the gate. The boundary. The space that lets you be you and her be her, while still allowing me to be part of your life. Sophia smiled through her tears. That's the right answer. It's the only answer, Daniel said. For all of us. Epilogue. Spring in the city. 6 months later, Daniel stood in the same rose garden in Prospect Park, watching the flowers bloom. Sophia was beside him, her hand warm in his. They'd spent the winter rebuilding their relationship, slowly learning to trust each other again. It hadn't been easy. There had been setbacks and arguments and moments when Daniel wondered if he'd made the right choice. But there had also been breakthroughs, real intimacy built on honest communication, a deepening love that felt more solid than anything he'd experienced before. Sophia and Isabella were still working on their boundaries. They'd moved into separate apartments, a physical separation that mirrored their emotional work. They still saw each other often, but on purpose now, with intention. They were learning to be sisters without being mirror images. Do you ever regret it? Sophia asked, watching the roses. Choosing to stay. Daniel thought about it. Sometimes. When it's hard. When I remember how it all started. But then I remember why I stayed, not for the person I thought I met outside the Strand, but for the person I actually got to know. The real you. The real me is still a work in progress. We all are. Isabella approached from the other side of the garden, waving. She had a new boyfriend, an art dealer who knew about the twins' situation and didn't seem fazed by it. They'd all had dinner together the previous week, and it had been surprisingly normal. Ready? Isabella called. The gallery opening starts in an hour. Sophia squeezed Daniel's hand. Ready. As they walked through the garden together, Daniel and Sophia hand in hand, Isabella just slightly ahead, Daniel thought about gates and boundaries, about separation and connection. About how love sometimes meant respecting the space between people as much as the closeness you shared. He thought about identical faces and different souls, about the danger of confusing one for the other. About how he'd almost walked away from something real because it had been built on something false. In the end, he'd learned that everyone wore masks sometimes. Everyone had versions of themselves they presented to the world. The question wasn't whether someone was perfectly honest from the first moment, it was whether they were willing to remove the mask eventually, to show you the truth underneath, however imperfect. Sophia had done that. She'd shown him her messy, complicated truth. And he'd chosen to love her anyway. Not in spite of her flaws, but including them. That, he thought as the spring sun warmed his face and the woman he loved laughed at something her sister said, was what real love looked like. Not the fairy tale version where everything was perfect from the start, but the hard-won version where two imperfect people chose each other, again and again, despite everything. Behind them, a photographer captured the moment, three people walking through a garden, one gate closing and another opening. A new chapter, honestly written this time. The end.